Hello and welcome back to Betting People with Jess Stafford of Furlough Thoroughbreds. Now, I'm very keen to ask, and I do this with all my interviews, but we've had people from a range of backgrounds who've found racing through many different ways. First things first, how did you get into the sport?
So my parents started up Furlough Thoroughbreds when I was 4, along with my uncle. For anyone that isn't familiar with them, they're a racing syndicate, and which brings in groups of people together. Originally from London, sort of city people, people that enjoy racing but want to take out the painful elements of all the admin and the buying the horses and managing of it all. And we started then in 1994 and I've been going ever since. And for me, it was something I didn't have much option. I was brought around everywhere from the day I was born racing, on the gallops, and then it was something that I not necessarily I wasn't forced into it. It wasn't something that my parents said you have to come along, you have to be part of it. But I just was hooked. I'm an incredibly competitive person by nature, and I think I love the competitiveness of it. Very, very proud of what we have created with Furlough. It's a very difficult game to be in now, and I, from a young age, was really hooked on the buying and the bloodstock side. So I started going to the sales with my dad from a young age, and I've become part of the whole setup of it now, buying horses with them, race planning, going on the gallops, working with the trainers, working with the jockeys and the owners, and making sure it's a great experience. So it's a big part of my life and something that I hope to keep going, because we don't have many horses now, as many as we used to, but we are proud of our small little select number, and we hope to keep it going. But that was my route into racing originally. Like, it was always part of me, but I went to school, university, and when I went to university, I definitely didn't think I'd get into racing as a job. I thought I'd always have Furlough as a background, but I wanted to do something else because I wanted to get a good perspective on what I could do, what I could challenge myself. As I said, very competitive, so it was like challenging what I could be good at. Read history at Trinity Dublin and stayed in Ireland, where I worked in a PR agency, which got me back into racing. Ireland is a wonderful place to be because they have a link to racing wherever you go, and they needed more support on their racing accounts, especially for Guinness and the Galway Festival. So I did a lot of stuff there. And then when I moved back to London, I actually got a job at Betfair and worked there for 3 and a bit years. And again, I think racing, having a niche in racing and specializing it and knowing about the sport is quite unusual. When you're in, especially betting companies, you underestimate how many people actually know about racing. And there was probably about 2 or 3 in a team, about 20 or 30 that actually knew about the details of it. So I used that skill, I suppose. And that's led me onto a path into presenting, because as you can tell, all I can do is talk about it. So it's got me to this presenter role now. So it's been a bit of an unusual route up to it, but definitely one that I wouldn't change, because it's given me the opportunity to see all areas of the working world, from sport and now racing.
You listed lots of the responsibilities that you've got there. How do you balance those commitments? Because you know, just in a typical week, just in the last week, you've been interviewing everybody at Epsom for TVG. You also do a lot of race planning as well. You might be buying one day, next day along. Do you ever stop, really? And how do you balance it? Because today, as I speak to you, you're off to Goodwood after this. So actually, could you take us through sort of, let's say, a typical week and what it might involve? Because there's going to be a lot of prep, as we all know, for race day presenting, and of course, when you're going to the sales and such, you're going through the catalogue books, etc. It's a lot to handle.
Oh yeah, and I think a couple of weeks ago, when I was up at the Doncaster sales, we were selling a horse, and I was also looking around just in case there's something that caught my eye. We're not necessarily into those stores, but I just wanted to go up there. I was up there on a Sunday, selling the horse on a Wednesday, looking through the horses on the Monday and Tuesday. But I was also at Chelmsford presenting on the Thursday. So I used the Tuesday afternoon to prep for Chelmsford while I was up at Doncaster, and then drove from Doncaster to Chelmsford on the Thursday. And then I had something else on the Friday. I think I was in the studio on the Friday. So yeah, you do have to get into, I like to plan as much as I can. Like I have a written out diary and I write everything down, which I know I can do. And then I like to fill in the gaps. Like I work for Racing TV 16 days a month. So when I get my schedule and I've got a couple of days where I know that I'm not working before a race meeting that I'm at, I will make sure that I'm either on the gallops, at the sales, up at home, where I'm helping my parents, or doing anything, because I don't like sitting still. Also, this is such a strange life. Like you could be working on a Saturday night and a Sunday, but not working Monday and a Tuesday. So I've got to fill up those days because I'm not going to sit around. And I just think things pass you by otherwise. You've got to keep your finger on the pulse in this game. Like you've got to keep your wits about you. Things are changing all the time. Like race in terms of racing and knowing where to place our horses. Races are coming up all the time, making sure that our horses are at their prime. Planning events that we might be doing for Thurlow, that takes organisation. So there's plenty to do, but I need to always be very organised and my central focus is at the end of the day presenting. So I spent all of Wednesday, once the declarations came out for Goodwood today, going through every single horse that's running, making sure I know all their form, watching all of their last races, writing down all their notes so that today when I go off to Goodwood, I've got everything listed out so I know every horse. So everything is kind of working back from the next day, and then filling in where I can try to do Thurlow and then TVG obviously on top of that too.
Now, in race planning, also in sort of the race analysis as well, I imagine there's a lot of individual study of certain races. And I just wondered if do you handicap, races? Will you, for example, when trying to get, say, for example, Buzz or whatever horse, like the best opportunity, you'll be looking at your opposition a lot. Do you assess race day fields in the same way that, say, a handicapper or a punter or a tipster would? And what's your method for doing that?
Yeah, I think I do. I don't think I've changed much since I was young. Like when I was growing up, I would get the Racing Post, an old school Racing Post. I love the form aspects of the Racing Post where you can see all of their last races. Obviously, you can now do it online, but I would always look at what's the horse rated, what was their last race form, are they on a downward trajectory or on an upward trajectory? That's always important to me, where they are compared to their handicap mark, especially obviously in handicaps. The better the race, slightly the easier it is, because I think it gets a little bit obvious if you've got reached the pinnacle of a horse's talent or whether they're fairly unexposed. But handicaps are the tricky one, and that's the puzzle that's always the best to solve. So love to incorporate all the factors and try to just find the value there. And as you say, I definitely look at it as I do with our own horses. If I know one of our horses is well handicapped, look at it in and around the rest of the field that they're running against, because 9 times out of 10 there's going to be another horse that's pretty well handicapped as well. So you're right. I do it just like I do with when I'm planning for our own horses. And I try and find the main dangers. But the difference is from what I'm looking at Goodwood, say today, or Ascot next week, I know the horses based on what I've seen in their races, how their running styles like, how the track will suit them, just trying to use my own methodology to try and pick out something that's caught my eye. And sometimes there's no reason for it. A horse can just run in a style. That's why it's so important to watch races back. A horse can run in a style that's just made you think today is going to be their day. They've got their conditions, they've got the track. Tracks are so important to get the best out of a horse. And the more I go racing around the country, the more I can sort of see that. Like I've become a bit of a specialist at Chelmsford now because of where I go to. So all of those elements are crucial, but the one key bit that you get, the privilege you get when you've got horses that you own or you manage, is that you know exactly what they're like at home, you know their characters, you know if it takes them 2 or 3 races to get ready, you know how well that they are, and you know if they're just like getting to the point where they're probably at that right handicap mark, all those bits. So that's what changes it, and that's the edge that you need when you're running syndicates. So you need to be able to make sure that you're getting the best out of them all the time, whereas it's based on judgment when you're just handicapping them.
Yes, indeed. For that, when you're presenting on a race day, for example, Racing TV or TVG, what's the setup and how's that day go? You know, what's the planning for that day? Because obviously, you know, just like I'm interviewing you, you'll be interviewing lots of winning connections, and I wonder, is it something where you go with the flow and you get the winners and you try to make the best out of that, or will there sometimes be pre-arranged interviews, or will you sort of just take it as it comes? Because two race days could be very different. There could be a great difference between Epsom, for example, and say even Goodwood today, just based on what's happening in the vibe and the feel of the racecourse.
Yeah, and look, you can't plan for anything. It's live. Anything can happen. So that's why you have to look at every single horse, because any horse has the opportunity to win. So you've got to keep in mind whoever it might be. Like I was up at Thirsk the other day and Nigel Tinkler had a double, and I think it was like a 200-to-1 double. One of the horses was 50-to-1, and you've got to be prepared for anything. And after that, his owners were there. They had got on the double. They had won $6,000. I was interviewing them. So it's just, obviously knowledge about the horses is brilliant, but the people surrounding it is so much more of an opportunity to get out those stories. And I think that makes up the rich fabric of racing. There are so many people that have a story to share. And I get much more of a kick out of that than anything else when I do get the opportunity to meet people. It's fabulous speaking to trainers. You know, my job is to get the best out of them, not to try and show, especially, and also that's the same when I'm working with a pundit. I can have my opinion, but I want to know, I need to get the best out of them. That's what they're employed to do. The trainer is the be all and end all. They know everything about their horse. The jockey knows everything about the ride. I need to get out the best information out of them as opposed to trying to offer my own opinion. So it's trying to find all the angles and being very quick thinking. You've got to use your initiative in this game, and that it doesn't matter if you're presenting, you're handicapping, you're working behind the scenes, you're writing a story, whatever it is, you've got to use your initiative. And I've always thought that all my life, like just back yourself. Sometimes it is extremely hard to do. Got to have the confidence to back yourself. And I don't know if I'm necessarily always that confident, because it can be an overwhelming situation when you've got Aidan O'Brien about to walk over to you and you need to think of something clever, interesting, unusual to say after you've spoken to Lydia Hislop for half an hour. That's intimidating. But the more I do it, the more I learn, the more I feel like I'm trying better to do better. And that's all you can do. But you can never plan for these things. And, you know, today I could have an extremely unusual situation and something might happen that I would never have expected to. But those are the challenges that I think that make this job really interesting. And I'm excited for potentially that to happen, because it can bring out the best of me, or I can learn from it and something awful could happen. But I like to hope it could bring out something good.
Absolutely. I think plenty of people would agree that it has, and I think that's a great place to end part 2.